Can federal power truly restore peace to America's most troubled cities? Or does it risk overstepping? This is the deep dive. Today we're really cutting through the noise, trying to get straight to the core of a story that's grabbing headlines everywhere. We're heading to Memphis, Tennessee. It's a city, whose struggle with crime has hit a critical point. Just recently, President Donald Trump made a pretty major announcement, deploying the National Guard to Memphis. And it's a move that's really sparked intense debate. It raises these big questions about public safety, about government's role, and what law and order actually means for communities. So our mission today is to dive deep into the sources you've shared with us. We want to understand the stark reality of crime there, unpack the arguments, for and against federal intervention, and look at the bigger picture for cities facing similar things. We want you to walk away really understanding this complex situation, not just knowing the headlines.
Exactly. And this isn't just about Memphis, is it? It's reflecting a much larger national conversation. We're seeing this critical point where local control, state responsibility, and federal power are all sort of colliding, and everyone has different ideas about how to best protect people. We'll be looking closely at why now, why this deployment, what's the president's thinking, and also the very strong reactions, often, on opposite ends of the spectrum, that this decision has caused. It's urgent, and we're going to try and help you make sense of it all.
Okay, so to really get the weight of President Trump's decision, we have to look at the reality that pushed Memphis to this point. The data from our sources, well, it paints a picture of a city really under pressure. The numbers are, frankly, alarming. Think about this. Back in 2021, the overall crime rate in Memphis hit 80.5 crimes per 1,000 residents. A staggering number.
Staggering's right. To put that in perspective for you, that means nearly 1 in 12 people could be a victim of crime in a single year there. That's almost 4 times the national average, which sits around 23 per 1,000.
Wow. So it's not just a bit higher. It's fundamentally different. A much more dangerous reality day-to-day compared to most of the country.
Absolutely. And what's troubling is that these high rates, they aren't just a blip for Memphis. It's been a persistent challenge. Looking at more recent data, 2024 numbers show Memphis recorded about 2,500 violent crimes per 100,000 residents.
2,500 per 100,000.
Yeah. That makes it the highest rate in all of Tennessee, and more than 3 times the national average. So this isn't just a city having a bad year. It's been in a sustained public safety crisis for some time.
And that 2023 data you mentioned really underlines it. Our sources highlight that was a peak year, a homicide rate of 57.0 per 100,000 residents. That gave Memphis the unfortunate title of having America's highest per capita murder rate.
Tragically, yes. And when you look at the most common crimes, aggravated assault really stands out, not just in Memphis, but in other cities facing similar issues. So it's not just numbers on a page. It's about direct violent threats to people's safety.
Okay, but haven't there been some reports of improvements recently? I feel like I've heard about targeted efforts.
That's a crucial point. Yes, there have been some targeted improvements. Our sources do note that homicides saw a reduction, about 20.8% by August 2025, and motor vehicle theft dropped quite a bit, 36.4% in the first half of 2025. Those are definitely welcome drops.
Okay, welcome. But are they enough? Are these isolated wins against a much bigger problem?
That seems to be the case, because when you zoom out and look at Shelby County overall, the early 2025 data paints a more worrying picture. Despite those specific drops, the overall violent crime rate actually went up by 17.4%.
Went up?
Yeah, and property crime surged by 21.6%. Robberies specifically jumped 17%. So what this suggests is while some local efforts might work in specific areas or on specific crimes, they're just not stemming the overall tide across the region. The problem seems bigger and still growing.
Underlying all this is the issue of resources, right? Local law enforcement being stretched thin.
Absolutely. That's a key factor. Our sources show a worrying trend in staffing. The Memphis Police Department, they have 1,958 officers currently. That's actually down 42 officers from the end of 2024.
Down, even with these crime rates.
Exactly. And the Shelby County Sheriff's Office is facing similar issues. They have 608 deputies, which is down 4 from the end of last year. Both agencies are operating way below their 2020 staffing levels.
And that understaffing must have real consequences on the ground.
Of course, it's not just a number. It creates gaps in coverage, means slower response times, fewer patrols, less capacity for investigations. It just exacerbates the whole crisis. And think about where this hits hardest. You look at neighborhoods like downtown Memphis, 85 violent crimes per 1,000 people, 35% poverty. Or Parkway Village, Oak Haven, 60 violent crimes per 1,000, 40% poverty. These aren't just stats. Imagine living where nearly 1 in 10 experience violent crime and over a third live in poverty. It erodes trust, safety, community. And that's exactly where understaffed police forces face the biggest hurdles.
Okay, so this grim reality seems to be the backdrop for the federal government stepping in. President Trump's decision to send in the National Guard. It feels like a direct response to these numbers, this crisis. What was his specific reasoning?
Well, his rationale is very direct. He called Memphis deeply troubled by escalating violence and unrest. And he vowed to, quote, fix it like we did Washington. That statement itself connects this to his past actions. It frames this as a strong-hand approach, needed because, from his viewpoint, local efforts have failed. It fits that broader law and order philosophy.
A philosophy that prioritizes strict enforcement and decisive action.
Precisely. And this move got immediate strong support, especially from Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn.
Right. She applauded the decision pretty quickly.
She did. She put it very clearly. She said Trump has stepped in to restore law and order in blue cities that refuse to protect their own citizens. And she added he aims to hold left-wing officials accountable for the consequences of soft-on-crime agendas.
Okay, let's pause there. Blue cities, soft-on-crime agendas. Can you quickly unpack those terms for us? They come up a lot in these discussions.
Sure. Law and order itself usually means strict enforcement, tough penalties, strong police presence to ensure public safety. Blue cities is just shorthand, often used politically, for cities primarily governed by Democrats or liberals. And soft-on-crime agendas, well, that's what critics call policies, they see as too lenient things like maybe reduced sentencing, bail reform, focusing more on rehabilitation than punishment. The argument from critics, like Senator Blackburn here, is that these policies lead to higher crime. So she's framing this intervention as both a response to crime and a political statement on governance.
Got it. And this isn't the first time President Trump has used this kind of strategy, is it? Deploying the Guard.
Not at all. It's consistent with what we saw during his presidency. He deployed the Guard to Washington, D.C., to Los Angeles, during periods of unrest. And he's openly threatened to send troops to other big cities, often led by Democrats, Chicago, Baltimore, New Orleans. So it shows a clear pattern, using federal power, including military or quasi-military forces, to directly address what he sees as a breakdown in local control and safety.
Basically saying federal strength will step in when needed to enforce order.
That's the message, yeah.
What's also interesting is how the state leadership, specifically Governor Bill Lee, seems to have shifted on this. Initially, he wasn't planning on Guard involvement.
Right. It's interesting how quickly things change. Back in August, Governor Lee said there were no plans for deployment. He highlighted the state's own investments in fighting crime. But then, by September, just a month later, he confirmed he was working with the administration on a plan. He said, quote, nothing is off the table.
Quite a shift. What do you think drove that?
Well, it suggests immense political and public pressure, right? Maybe a recognition that the state's efforts, while significant, weren't seen as enough, given the scale of the problem. Perhaps acknowledging that acting decisively, even with federal help, was becoming politically necessary. From that law and order viewpoint, this shift reinforces their argument. Guard support is needed. It frees up local police, gives a boost where they're understaffed, like we know they are in Memphis. The idea is that this visible presence disrupts crime now and gives local agencies breathing room.
So with federal help potentially arriving, how are the local leaders in Memphis actually reacting? This must be a complicated situation for them.
It definitely is, and their reactions show a real split in priorities. Memphis Mayor Paul Young, he acknowledged being told about the potential deployment. But he also clearly stated his preference was different. He emphasized needing financial resources for intervention and prevention, additional patrol officers, and case support.
So he wants resources to build up local capacity, not necessarily outside troops.
Exactly. He also mentioned that Memphis is already making measurable progress on its own, which kind of contrasts with President Trump's claim that both Mayor Young and Governor Lee were happy with the decision.
Right. That does sound like a disconnect. Maybe different definitions of happy or different priorities altogether.
Could be. And we also heard from Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris. He urged reconsideration, specifically voicing concerns about the militarization of the city.
Militarization, what are the typical concerns around that idea?
Well, the worry is often about unintended consequences, increased tension between residents and soldiers, maybe, a feeling that civil liberties are eroding, or the idea that a military presence could actually escalate situations rather than calming them down. So these different local reactions really highlight the core tension: immediate security needs versus long-term community building and trust.
And this ties into the bigger debate about what actually causes crime in the first place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how best to tackle those deeper issues.
Absolutely. You can't talk about this without getting into the root causes discussion. For instance, Democratic Representative Steve Cohen, who represents Memphis, he points directly to historical factors, things like slavery, segregation, and lack of investment in low-income communities.
So he sees it as a long-term systemic problem requiring systemic solutions.
Precisely. He argues strongly for federal money to go into proven programs, things focused on education, jobs, mental health, housing, community development. His view is that addressing these deep inequalities is the only path to lasting safety.
Okay, so that's one perspective. Focus on root causes and long-term investment.
Yes, but then you have the counter-argument, particularly from the law and order perspective, backing this deployment. They acknowledge the importance of root causes, in the long run, but they argue the immediate reality for people in Memphis is dangerous now. Their position is you can't effectively address root causes if basic safety isn't guaranteed day to day.
So the deployment is framed as step one: restore order first, then maybe address the deeper issues.
That's essentially the argument. Address the immediate threat, make communities safe again, then create the space for those longer-term solutions. This federal action is positioned as a direct response to what they see as the failure of, quote, soft-on-crime policies to provide that immediate security. It's about protecting citizens now from what they describe as escalating violence.
So we end up with these two fundamentally different approaches, really. One focused on immediate, forceful intervention,
To restore order quickly.
and the other advocating for long-term federal investment in social programs to fix those underlying systemic problems.
Yeah, and both sides genuinely believe their approach is what's needed for people's safety and well-being. They just have very different ideas about the best way and the right timing to get there.
So, wrapping this up, what does it all mean for Memphis and maybe for other cities too? We've laid out this undeniable crime crisis. The statistics are just stark, painting a picture of a really tough daily reality for citizens there. And against that, you have this assertive federal move, the National Guard, driven by a call to restore law and order. It highlights this tension, doesn't it, between the need for immediate action and calls for deeper change.
It really does, and you have to see this deployment as more than just a tactic for crime stats. It's a bold statement. It's a statement about the necessity, from one perspective, of federal action when local governance is seen as failing to keep order. It signals this decisive top-down approach. But like you said, it immediately ignites that debate about federal power, local control, and what's truly effective long-term.
Which leaves us with a big question to think about. As federal forces step into cities like Memphis to combat crime, what is this signal for the future? The future of local control, the future of how we address crime. How do we balance that immediate need for safety with the complex long-term needs of communities? And who ultimately is responsible for ensuring peace? It's a question that definitely echoes far beyond Memphis, something for all of us to consider.